Well, look, thank you very much for your time and for everybody that's tuned in. Look, I think by the end of this 25-30 minutes, I'd like to really reset the story for Arctic Minerals. We are a company that's listed on the Nordic Nasdaq First Growth Market in Stockholm. We are a Swedish company with a Nordic focus, but we are effectively a brand new company from October 2024, even though we have been around for a bit longer. And I guess that's a good way to sort of segue into starting a little bit about how that happened. But before I do that, just a little bit on myself. So I'm a mining engineer and a mineral economist by profession. My experience in Sweden goes back all the way to having worked for Bolaget back in the 90s. I was very fortunate there, and together with my deputy CEO and chief geologist Erik Lundström, we both started as graduates back in the 90s and worked underneath the tutelage of Lars-Erik Aro, of course, who was a former managing director of LKAB and I think a vice president of Bolaget at the time that we were there. But I guess going back into the reason for the Arctic becoming a new company back in October 2024, Erik and I, together with Robert Behetz, our current chairman, we decided we wanted to build a new private company going back into 2023 with a focus on Sweden. Obviously with Erik and myself and our background, a long background in Sweden, with Erik having spent 17 years with Bolaget after I left and having 6 major discoveries in his own right. We have a fairly good understanding of how the Swedish and the Nordic market works and where the opportunities lay. So we built a private company called Rare Earth Energy Metals, which we put in 2 projects. We had our Hennes Bay project down in Dalsland in Sweden, and also our Swan Lake project up in northern Sweden, up in Norrbotten. We were introduced to the Arctic Minerals team back in about June of 2024, where Peter Walker was the non-executive chairman at the time. He made it very clear that they were getting a little bit long in the tooth by their own admission, the board and management team getting up into their late 70s. So they were looking for a refresh to bring in a new management team and a new board, but also to bring in some new projects, with their major project at the time being the Bidjovagge project up in Finnmark in northern Norway, which unfortunately has been somewhat locked for political reasons, but an extremely valuable project in its own right. So as mentioned, we did Arctic Minerals bought my private company, and myself, Robert, and Erik, we became major shareholders in the Arctic Minerals company, which has now resulted in, I think, the top 20 controlling about 70% of the company. So it's a pretty tightly held stock. We also did a reverse split 10-1 early last year, really we wanted to spend the first year which was 2025, of course, just really recapitalizing the company. And we've raised about 40 million krona during the last 12 to 15 months, as well as fixing the board, fixing the management team, and then really the last part of it being changing the focus of the company from the Bidjovagge to the Hennes Bay project. So that, of course, made us very much, as per my slide here, a force in Nordic exploration and development. So not only did we have the Bidjovagge project and the Hennes Bay project, we also had our Swan Lake project and our Kussi project. So that gave us projects in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So one truly Nordic experience. But our aim was to be focusing on large-scale deposit types. So this is the sediment-hosted stratiform copper-silver type deposit that we have at Hennes Bay, and the porphyry copper-gold style up at Swan Lake. Of course, we have the sediment-hosted copper-silver style deposits. These are pretty similar to what you would see down in the copper schiffer, down in Poland, Germany, over in White Pine in the US, and also over in the Congo with the Ivanhoe mines. Yeah, so and mentioned a highly experienced board and management team, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But this is a group of people that we've known each other for over 30 years, highly trust each other, highly experienced, but also a massive track record of being able to take companies from a very low market capitalization into a very large market capitalization. We'll come back to that. But I think also, so the time of what we're doing is absolutely perfect. You know, we're focusing in on the copper, the silver, the gold, and of course we've got some very nice critical metal byproducts that potentially could be coming out of Hennes Bay, including the gallium, the germanium, some rare earth metals such as rhenium and vanadium. So timing is, as mentioned already, perfect. We've got the EU Critical Raw Materials Act, which has come into play now, and I think it's fair to say that Sweden is really leading the way in Europe for trying to bring back exploration and mining into the EU after sort of 50 years of underinvestment, really. A little bit about the market itself. So as I mentioned, I'm a mineral economist also by profession, as well as being a mining engineer. So I really study the trends. I won't go into too much detail, but basically I'm a strong believer that we're already at peak copper. And that basically means that as an industry, we can't produce the amount of copper that the world requires. And that's just to keep the standard of living that we have today. You throw the electrification of everything into that, including solar panels and electrical vehicles, etc., and the world's in trouble. It hasn't quite woken up to the fact yet that we don't know where we're going to get the copper from. So having a copper asset such as what we have here is obviously a major plus for us. And I could say exactly the same thing for silver. We've had 5 years of deficits, which means that we're producing less than what the world is consuming. And for a metal like silver, which is a precious metal, but it's also an industrial metal, which is a huge amount is being used in solar panels today, and also in high-end electronics. So the timing is perfect. And just, I guess, building on that, the copper thematic, perhaps what people don't really understand is that, and one of the reasons why copper is a critical metal today, but in Europe, we import about 50% of our copper concentrate from outside, and the majority of that's coming from countries like Chile in South America, so over 12,000 kilometers away. And a copper concentrate, of course, is between 20 and 30% metal content. So in other words, we're importing 70 to 80% rubbish from 12,000 kilometers away, all in the name of protecting the environment. At least that's what it's, the reasons for why there's been 50 years of underinvestment. But I think that it's starting to recognise now in Europe that we are a tier 1 jurisdiction. We need to be bringing mining and exploration back here and holding executives such as myself to very high levels of compliance, which is what we have in countries like Sweden, Norway and Finland, to ensure that things are done to a very high level of environmental compliance, which of course are not in all countries around the world, especially outside of the EU. And then that's not to mention just the jobs and the security of supply that we require. I think it's quite clear to everybody that since COVID, the Chinese have unfortunately held us to ransom a little bit on some of these critical metals. And of course, we've had the issues with Russia in recent times and Ukraine, and then in even more recent times with the US putting tariffs onto the rest of the world. So we really do need to start focusing on ourselves, and the days of being able to call upon international supply just have disappeared pretty much overnight. So onto the project portfolio. As I mentioned, Bidjovagge was the major project for Arctic for many years. Couldn't really get anywhere because of the political issues. But it is an amazing project, and I think it's going to be an extremely important copper gold project going into the future. One of the best ones I've seen. I mean, there's some phenomenal intersections in there. 27 meters at 3.1% copper and 0.6 grams per ton gold. 18 meters at 2.2% copper and 34 grams per ton gold. I mean, these are world-class intersections. But now that it's a secondary project for us, it gives us the ability to work on the technical issues as well as the political issues in the background. So I hope to have some good news on where all that is heading in the near future. But more on to Hennes Bay, now being our flagship project and based down there in Dalsland in Sweden. Look, this is a very important project. It's been known about for over 100 years. Was drilled out with about 14,000 meters of, 14,000 meters of drilling by the Swedish state, going back into the 70s and 80s. Had a non-JORC compliant resource over the top of it, about 20 million tons at 1% copper equivalent. But when we picked it up in October 2003, Eric and I put a lot of time into just trying to work out exactly what we were dealing with. It became very obvious that this is a system that's an awful lot larger than a 20 million ton deposit. So we, as well as rebuilding the company, recapitalizing the company with 40 million that we've done over the last 15 months, we also went back and had a real serious look at the data, the historical data that was available for the project. We found a lot of the core, well, all of the core, up in Malå in northern Sweden. We re-assayed a significant portion of that, assayed it, and got very good reconciliation between the old results and the new results. Handed all of that data over to Cube Consulting out of Australia, the third-party JORC resource geologists, and they produced a 55.4 million ton resource at 1% copper equivalent, which is about 0.8% copper and 20.8 grams per ton silver. So nearly 450,000 tons of copper metal and some nearly 40 million ounces of silver in the ground. So a significant resource just in its own right, got us very excited, but no modern exploration on it over the last 40 years, less than 5% of the 402 square kilometre package that we had, and just really crying out for some investment. But I will come back to Hennes Bay in a bit more detail, and just to round out our well-balanced portfolio that we have there. We also have our Kuusi project over in Finland, a very early days greenfields exploration project that we haven't done too much on, but we have some smaller plans for this particular year to push that along. Swan Lake, a very important project. It sits in between the Aitik and Lava projects, both owned by Boliden, with the Aitik mine, of course, up around the 2.2 billion ton mark. Extremely profitable, low-grade mine. We're convinced that we have another copper porphyry epithermal gold system sitting smack bang in between of these two. We've done quite a bit of work in recent times on the geophysics, and we hope to have some results out on that very soon. But the initial feedback is it's looking extremely positive and in line with our expectations. So focusing in on Hennes Bay, so as mentioned, we had the 55.4 million tons of 1% copper equivalent that came out in March. 100% inferred. There's probably a significant portion of that's actually indicated, but we took a conservative view. That's at a 0.8% copper equivalent cutoff, and of course now all giant, which it wasn't before. Very similar to the copper schiffer down in Poland, and I've actually been down there a couple of times in the last 12 months having a look at the equipment and the mining methods, very much applicable to what we're doing here. Immense resource growth upside, exploration upside here. If you have a look at this map here on the right hand side, so Dingelvik is where we have the 55 million tons today. We actually have another 5 prospects, Hennevik and Aslabin, Baldersnäs, Osnabu, and Hässerud Norra. These are, they've got about another 4,000 meters worth of drilling in them, or nearly 5,000 meters worth of drilling in them. Again, don't quite make the JORC compliant categorization, so require a bit of drilling. So we actually submitted some plans for drilling last year. We've had those. Most of those have come back as been awarded now, and we hope to be up drilling very, very soon in the next few weeks. Actually, already appointed the drilling contractor, and they should be mobilising in the near future. But so there's just in those yellow areas, we think that there's at least another 25 million tonnes, more than likely an awful lot more. These have only just got a small amount of drilling in them. But we've also got grab samples up to 18 kilometres away where the mineralisation outcrops at surface of 1.78% copper and 40 grams per tonne silver. So these are high grade nowadays. As mentioned, these types of SSC mineral systems, they are very large, and with our 402 square kilometre package, which is actually, we've just had another 12 square kilometres awarded in the last few weeks. That takes up to 414. There's less than 5% of that has been drill tested. So a huge amount of upside potential. But before we started the drilling, though, we made the strategic decision that we wanted to bring in some modern geophysics, which there hasn't been any geophysics done on the area for over 40, 50 years. So we investigated a lot of methods, but we came to the conclusion that we wanted to test the MMT, or airborne magnetotelluric survey method. We flew that sort of middle to halfway through towards the end of last year. We put out the results for that, and it's fair to say that we were really happy with what's come out. But basically, this is a method that tests the conductivity and resistivity of the ground down to anywhere up to 1,000 meters. We tested an area which is only a third of the tenement package, and we could see that we had very strong anomalisation that lined up very well with the Bidjovagge resource, as well as the other areas where we've got drilling and intersections of ore. And we can even see that the stronger grades, such as up at Hennes Bay, which are up to 1.4, 1.5%, they come up stronger in stronger anomalies within the MMT survey. So that was a real game changer for us, and we're now making plans to bring in the guys to come in and do some more of that geophysics later on this year. But of course, the big thing of that being that the footprint of the target area is 10 times larger than Bidjovagge, so that gives us a very good backup information for us as to where we can drill when we move forward. So we're also starting to submit our second round of drilling plans to test these particular anomalies. So that they've already been submitted now. So we'll hope to get some of those back in the very near future. Last year we also did an underground conceptual mining study. There's no financials associated with that. That was purely from my interest to see whether or not this could be mined. We handed all the information over to another third party, Deswick, out of Australia, and they designed up a 3 to 4 million tonne per annum with multiple declines, for over between 10 and 15 years. Room and pillar, high speed, high volume underground mine, almost exactly the same as what they're using down there in the copper schiffer in Germany and Poland and over there in the Congo. Just really gave me that confidence that we were dealing with something that could be mined, and that'll be the first step for us in a pending preliminary economic analysis that we're already working on. But talking a bit more about Dalsland, from an infrastructure perspective, it's fantastic. I mean, as you can probably hear, I am an Australian. I'm also a Swede, having spent so much time here. But when I talk to my Australian friends about the infrastructure that's down here in Dalsland, they don't believe me. I've got 2 400 kilovolt electrical transmission lines over the property. I've got 2 railway lines over the property. I'm an hour away from Gothenburg, an hour away from Karlstad. Fresh water everywhere, and of course access to a highly educated workforce, and very cheap power, especially compared to where I come from. Having access to that hydro, nuclear and wind power that we have available to us in Sweden is unbelievable. So a fantastic infrastructure that we can take advantage of as we move forward. the work plan going forward. Look, and perhaps before I go into that, what I'm really trying to achieve here is to grow the resource up between 200 and 300 million tonnes as quickly as possible. And that might sound ambitious, but this style of mineralisation, it really leans itself towards massive growth because of our ability to drill wide spaced holes up to 1,200 metres between drill holes for an spacing, which you compare that to some of our compatriots around who are trying to mine IOCG or VMS style deposits, and they're around 80 to 100 metres between drill holes. So we can get up to 10 times better bang for buck for our drilling, which also means we can grow our resource a lot larger. But as far as the forward work plan is concerned, not only do we have the drilling, but we have our stakeholder engagement aspects, and the license to operate is extremely important. We put a huge amount of effort into building relationships, both at a federal and local political level, also from a local level on the business. We've just given our first contract to a local metallurgy firm to help us out with support works for all of the drilling. We've appointed a Swedish drilling contractor who's coming in soon. So and then on top of that, we have all of our baseline environmental, heritage, and cultural investigations, which we require to do for our mining concession and our environmental permits. And I guess on that, we're looking for a logical question, which will probably come at the end, is how long is it going to take us before we're in production? But I think I can compare us to the Viscaria gruvbolag. They've done a fantastic job leading the way here, and I think they were around the 45 million tonnes mark in 2018, 2019. They're knocking on the door of production in 2027. So 5 to 6 years construction, and until getting ready for construction, having done all of the baseline work that's required to get their permits, as well as finalising feasibility studies. So I see no reason why we can't achieve the same in an environment which is perhaps even a little bit more politically friendly than when Viscaria started. So I think hopefully we're under promising and we can over deliver in that regard. The resource expansion side I've already touched on. We've got the 3 different drilling programs of around about 20,000 meters that we're looking to work on in the next year or so. We're already testing the exploration model with our MMT. We're bringing those guys in to do another round very soon. Of course, the project development, the PEA, as mentioned, we've already started that process with the underground conceptual mining study. Metallurgical testing we're doing, we already have access to some historical testing that was done, which gave very good recoveries, up in the 90 to 95% for recoveries for the copper, and 85 to 90% on the silver. With some results producing a con up to 38% copper and 450 odd grams of silver. So, and with no deleterious elements, which is a fantastic result, which will make our concentrate extremely attractive for everybody. I guess then just talking a little bit about our balanced portfolio. So we do, we're not a one-trick pony. We do have our Hennes Bay as our main project, but it's very important from my perspective that we have multiple projects at various stages. We as a non-producing company, we live and die by our ability to produce news. And I think it's quite easy to see via our share price. And every time we put out a milestone, we get a significant uplift in a market revaluation in our share price. I think we've moved from 2.4 krona prior to the putting out the resource last year to up to 11-12 krona. So a little bit up and down, but a massive impact every time we're putting out news, which is exactly what we want. Corporate summary, 47 million shares on issue. I think our share price is hovering between that 8 and 8.5. A market cap of around about 380 million. I think we have somewhere about the 17.5 million second at the moment. So we're, our current plans for the 4,000 meter drilling program, they are fully funded. And the team I've spoken about, obviously, second to none in my opinion. But why invest in Arctic? Look, right commodities at the right time. The copper, you need to have the copper in your portfolio going forward. It's as I mentioned, I'm certain that we've reached peak copper already. It's a very stable market as compared to some of these smaller ones. But we have some very good silver and gold within our portfolio, and also these other byproducts of the gallium, germanium, vanadium, and the rare earths such as rhenium, which we can tap into if required. The geology, we're after big deposits, so we're not after something that's only going to be up there for a couple of years and then disappear. We want to have multi-generation and the multi-decade projects, which is just we're of the belief that these are too hard to say no to. We've got the right team in place, the right jurisdiction, a firm believer in the Nordics. I've been operating here for a long time. It's one of my favourite places. The balanced portfolio I've mentioned, and I guess also positioned within the Nordic markets. It's just a very important part, trying to lead the way within the EU itself. That's the end of the presentation, but I do have a bit of a few slides here from where Axios Barona through Analyst Guide and put out some research on us last week. Definitely worth your while getting in there, downloading it from our website or from the Axios Barona's website. Just a few things in here of note. It is a long document, but it's worthwhile having a good read of. That we have a couple of concrete examples here of the value creation that our team has been involved in. Robert, our chairman, he was CEO for both of these companies and took them from, I'm talking Australian dollars here, but $100 million market cap in October 2006 to $1 billion in 5 years, having gone through exactly the same process I just described of building the resource out and getting the permits and as such, and did it again 2011 through to 2014. So the team knows what it's doing, both technically and financially. So do yourself a favour, have a look at that. If we are an exploration company. We don't have an NPV or an IRR out yet, but watch this space for when we put out the PEA. But a good method for comparing where we are compared to compatriots out there, and I think a logical one is comparing Arctic to Viscaria. We currently have a US dollar per million ton of 104. Viscaria is currently at 512, so you can see there that we have an awful lot of room to move as we move up through the various milestones. And this graph here sort of just shows what I had in the diagram earlier up in the presentation. I think where the Analyst Guide and guys have put this together, showing where we are and showing that potential EV per copper equivalent resource and how we can improve that as we move through the various stages. So that's really it from my point of view. Hopefully I haven't gone too far over time, but if there's any questions, feel free to jump in.
No, it's great. Thank you so much, Peter. Unfortunately, we have no time for questions. We're about 5 minutes overdue. Okay. But it's great that you pointed out the analysis coming from Analyst Guide as well. I get that's worth looking into for those who are more interested in Arctic minerals. Thank you so much, Peter, for this presentation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the time.